Hello and welcome everybody to the latest CTO Craft Bytes. So today we're going to be looking at what makes the ideal CTO, which I'm really excited about as I start a new CTO role on Monday, so it's perfect timing. If it's your first time at CTO Craft Bytes, then I'll tell you a little bit more about the group. So CTO Craft is a mentoring and coaching community for technology leaders all around the world. So focusing on supporting technologists in their leadership growth. Community members are over 7,000, I think now, and CTO Craft provides them with one-to-one coaching, mentoring groups, curated Slack community, and lots of events, great events like this one as well. So if you're not a member of the CTO Craft community yet and you're interested in becoming one, I'll post some links into the chat and then you can hopefully join. So I want to say a big thank you to our headline partners, AWS, for making these events possible. So my name's Anna and I'm going to be moderating the event today, and very excited to have Cornel with us today. So Chief Platform Officer at Pentalog. Cornel, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, do a bit of an introduction?
Yes, thank you, Anna, and very, very happy to talk about the ideal CTO here with you. I have more than 20 years of experience in the IT world. I started mostly as a kid, I could say. At 15 years old, I was already employed in a company as a developer. I've done all sorts of jobs, from developer, software architect, project director, CTO, of course, product owner. And I do enjoy continuing in this industry, making business great. Yeah, we've discovered and structured new ways of looking at a CTO role, and I'm going to share about that. There is actually a series called CTO Fundamentals, and we are going to go through all that, if I understood correctly. I'm very happy with you, with CTO Craft. And this is the first episode of that. And here it's about a character you will discover soon, who is a developer and becoming a CTO. And he doesn't really have a clue of what the CTO role means. And that's very interesting, how he ends up with the definition of that CTO. And then we'll go in a new episode in strategy, and then through tactics. And everything is wrapped up in something that we call a better CTO. And yeah, this is it. I hope you will enjoy the series and this episode.
Okay, great. Sounds fantastic. So just for everybody listening, you can add your questions in the ask a question bit at the bottom. We're going to leave plenty of time for questions, so have a little think as you go through. But Cornel, over to you.
Thank you. I'll share my screen now. If just you can confirm that the screen is visible.
Yes.
Everyone did?
Yeah. Yep, I can see that. Thank you.
Good. So, during the session, we will go to things like how a CTO is assigned. I think that's one of the most popular ways of assigning a CTO. We will talk a bit about skills acquisition, CTO accountability. How can we define a competent CTO? We'll go through tools. Not too much, not too much. We will touch a bit the CTO startup, which is quite a very interesting topic in itself, and CTO teams are the same. And we will wrap this together in what we call the ideal CTO. In terms of the structure of the session, as Anna said, write your questions. I will also try to recall you as much as I can during the session. But watch the slides, look at the highlights in the blue areas, the titles of the slides. And there is much more text in some slides, and that's for you when you run the session again after you download the slide deck. And with all the reference and things like this. If there are no reference in the slides, it means that it's part of the story and it's some sort unique, what we've defined for you. Most of the things that originate from a different source have references. So you can go further and dive in the session. It should take around 35 minutes. And yeah, we will have 20 minutes of Q&A. That being said, let's go to the story. The story is about a developer, as we said. It's a very happy developer. His name is Bob, and he is very, very appreciated. all his ideas, mostly all of them, are put in practice, which is not what he thinks and learns from others in the same industry branch. So he's so trusted by the company, he's doing even technical interviews, and he's loving his team. So an important part of Bob's happiness is the team. And everything is great until some things change. So his boss, his CTO, is going to leave. She definitely had a very good reason to do that. And suddenly Bob is getting calls. The executive officer is calling, saying, Bob, I think you are the next fit, the best fit that we can get, even better than the previous CTO we had. And I really want you to look into it. And then the CFO calls and says, look, Bob, this is your opportunity. Ours, of course, but yours also. I'm looking into some numbers here. It will be very interesting for you. Now, Bob doesn't really know, is that going to be the opportunity of his life or not? So he's calling for some sort of session and say, let's calibrate expectations. What does it mean, CTO, for you? Because I had a vision, but maybe I didn't see what was happening beyond the team. So he's looking into it with the executive officer and the financial officer, and it seems the list of expectations doesn't finish. So everything is in there. In fact, Bob doesn't find something which isn't in the list. A warranty for quality, respect the roadmap. Very important. Not talk too much about technology, because in the executive management, technology is not what matters. It's a means to achieve some goals. Keep the business safe, keep the company safe, of course, secured through safe, and all sorts of expectations like this. And with high responsibilities, there are also high benefits. So Bob, when he's looking at everything, says, I'm going to have a nice label, interesting salary. I'm going to make my team more autonomous, and myself, my ideas will be implemented faster in a sense. I was appreciated, but it will be much faster. I will have a say in the decision making at the overall big level, and I will have a C-level position. Who would have ever thought that Bob, so young, will become the CTO, C-level in a company? The challenge is that 9 months later, Bob is a bit tired. He's looking at what he's doing and says, I don't have the feeling that I'm more respected. With the team, it doesn't seem to go faster, better, even then things like degraded a bit. I don't have time to learn, so I'm minus everything on all the development access I can get. My self-esteem is a bit low because I feel like if I was a high achiever, I'm a very low achiever right now. And I start to believe it's not about me. I think it's about the company. Maybe the company doesn't worth having a great CTO or someone who's passionate about to make these changes. So he's willing to go further. He's looking in his networking and new opportunities. And he finds opportunities, of course, because still most of the times, except this period maybe, IT industry is recruiting a lot. So the process repeats itself. And that's something that upsets a lot Bob. How come a new company, the same him, the same vision of how the CTO should look like, has the same challenges, problems, impediments? So he doesn't feel he's understanding much better with the new executive management, with the new team. He doesn't seem to be appreciated. He's starting to have thoughts like, maybe it's just in the movies. Maybe just the Silicon Valley kind of companies are the companies where the role CTO works fine. But he doesn't have data or things like this to say he has a conclusion. And that's the problem. He says, when I was a developer, I was studying a lot. I was reading lots of books. I was getting better with time. So I was looking to books like Pragmatic Programmer. Those were the days. Entropy, software entropy, those were topics. Now, all the topics he's looking at as a CTO, they seem kind of primitive. Maybe that's the wrong word to say it, but this is what he feels right now. So he's going to study what the CTO role means. So he's landing on, he's Googling, he's looking for books, and he finds this video and he's shocked. 60% of the CTO job is not something else than purely administrative work. So this is what he had. So he doesn't really want to do that. He's doing tasks nobody wants to do them. So he spends important time with the everyone else, but not with the executive officer, and it seems to be important, and so forth. The challenge here is, look, I want to code, and I was thinking as a CTO that I'm going to do design, architecture, and all this stuff. So he's saying it's for sure. He tried it twice. Something is missing. He needs to have an approach as he had as a developer. So he needs to look at the knowledge portfolio. Obviously, there are new things to do that require new skills that need to be trained. So like muscles. So let's look at the portfolio of the skills required for the CTO so that he's doing a great job. He's getting questions, and what are the skills required to answer correctly these questions. And in this journey, he finds classical books. One is Chief Technology Officer, simple as that. Now, in this book, he finds that, of course, these statistics are being updated with time. If you buy the book, you will not find the January 22nd number of books. But he is amazed that there's not that much in terms of body of knowledge for CTO, structured body of knowledge out there. So that's an interesting indicator. And he's willing to learn more. And if you are looking at CTO books out there, you will find books if you search on Amazon, but they are from biology, from other stuff. And recently, we've discovered in 22 that there are lots of marketing materials now, which are more like triggers to download the book and things like this, but not real books that you could learn from. Interesting, but not books. And he discovers through this journey that the CTO was employed the first time in research facilities. So there were big companies, big corporates building research and development facilities, and they had problems in achieving return on investment with those projects. So they invented a role called the Chief Technology Officer during the 80s and said, we need to link these R&D activities to budget, to return on investment, to the strategy. So the first thing that triggered the CTO role was strategy. Now we see that the role evolved in time, and there are much more other flavors of CTO. Now, one of these perspectives is presented here. Now, if you know Pentalog a bit better, the company I'm representing, we've distanced a bit from this model. So we've split, for example, the CTO visionary and operations into two flavors, and we added subsets of that. So I'm going to go deep, but we keep this model because this is very important, and this is the one which is there public so that you can inspire from. So there is CTO as an infrastructure manager. We see this more and more popular because people are leveraging technology and not developing much of that. And we see this very popular. We've seen an interesting trend in France, for example. CTO as a big thinker. This is very specific for those who act as CTO at the group level and have many companies and subsidiaries, and they have other CTOs they work with. CTO visionary, their power comes from being experts in IT and product, usually in the technology world. So these are co-founders, visionary. So that they started the company, they were developers, and they are those who have the vision of the product, technology, things like this. And this is very important when we talk about something which is called the startup CTO. Startup CTO are CTOs who are unfortunately stuck in this early stages of development, and they cannot manage to learn and adapt as fast as the company does. So it's still a CTO visionary, a CTO startup. It's a subset of CTO visionary, so that everyone knows how to position themselves. And there's also something which we call the agile CTO, which is a subset of a CTO with a flavor of operations manager, also very important. We are not developing this here, so there are other subsets you might feel interesting. And the external facing CTO is something that I've done for a very long time, because I was working in a company who was doing advisory and outsourcing and helping hundreds of CTOs doing their job better. And so I've acted more as an external facing and big thinker. But in this, and actually now I'm also in a CTO visionary. Bob here is a CTO visionary, and he's taking all this and he's going to his coach, and he says, I want to work on that. So he's finding a coach, he's looking at Wheel of Life, and he says, I want to have a great career. So that's the area where he is going to invest more. Now, the coach is asking if that's really the area where he should invest more time, but Bob seems very committed to that. So he's pursuing his development. He lands on CTOs like Zapier, and who say, hey, look, don't over anticipate, run into bottlenecks and correct, which recalls him the role of the Scrum Master, who was an impediments remover. So there are problems, we remove them. And it's a bit of no man's land work. So he recalls what he learned so fast and previously. And also that nobody knows what the CTO role means. But the very important fact is, and useful for him in that company, was the fact that he was looking at new technologies a lot, and that's changed because not all the companies need to look equally in the way they adopt technology. So he's looking at this and saying, in fact, I'm reusing technology. I don't need to create it. I don't need to always create it, at least. So I'm going to say it takes me in average 12 times to integrate a new technology I can reuse, and that could win some energy for the company so that we better achieve our goals. So that's already some sort of shift change in the mindset of Bob. And he's taking the list of responsibilities as he took from the 4 flavors and says, this is how I'm doing my Bob first version of CTO role. And he says, I can't do this alone. I'm doing with my team. So what are things important for me to focus on, and things where the team is going to focus? So identify new technologies, low. Exploring technologies, still no. So he's looking at leverage existing technologies across businesses, because he has this feeling that there's much more technology out there already available that they don't use. And he is going to focus on that and the team. And he is going to focus on driving the business strategy, so co-partner with the executive officer a bit more, while the team will not do that. In exchange, the team will focus on things like FinOps related, on reduce costs, of course, under his leadership, but the team is going to do much more, most of the analysis and things like this. So he has a first definition of the CTO role. Now he takes all this and he says to his new executive officer, hey, I think I know what we can improve. We should co-work, we should collaborate. I need to collaborate more with the executive management. Unfortunately, it doesn't feel like everyone is feeling in the same way. So it's like a game he's playing. Like whatever happens, it seems getting to the same outcome in the relationship with the executive officer. And he goes to the coach and said, I feel she was mean with me, my executive officer. She reacted quite odd. I'm shocked. I'm doing my best. And I think the fact that I didn't deliver in time is because we don't talk a lot and there are many details I can't express. That's as easy as this. So the coach suggested a book called Games People Play and say, hey, it seems like on very finite games, on very narrowed activities, we play these games. And unconsciously, we didn't even do the first move and everyone is going to align. So this is an interesting body of knowledge that Eric Byrne built and that you might want to look at. And he reads the book and says, wow, this is precisely my job. So there's always something I intend when I communicate with people, and there's also something hidden, a hidden expectation I have, and a hidden expectation the player or other players have. So he feels this very interesting, and he's going to look much more into it later, to improve the relationship with the executive officer and the executive management as a whole and other teams. And when he listens himself, this is very, very important. He feels like he's a victim with many occasions. While the coach, when he's mirroring him, he says, it seems to me, if I will listen to you correctly, that you've lost a bit your responsibility. With many statements you do, everyone else is responsible, or the fault comes from the others, from other departments. And I think you should look at this responsibility process, which is something that can be taught, can be learned, can be mentored from Christopher Avery, and look where you stand and recognize where you stand, and because you are not in a responsible mindset. So that's a new, shocking for Bob, but that's why he's paying a coach. And then he's continually studying, and he's looking at things like fifth discipline. It's like a Bible in the creative space, creative organization, self-governing of organizations. It's such a big and interesting body of knowledge. We won't have time to talk much more about it. But from this book, he's going to extract something which is called the Dreyfus model. It's something that it's used in knowledge acquisition. So Dreyfus model is a model of skills acquisition. As every model, it oversimplifies the acquisition process. So he's looking on where he stands. There are definitions for novice, advanced beginner, competent, proficient, and expert. So these are the 5 levels. And if you don't have experience at the job, you can't be anything else than novice, even if you read, even whatever you did. Advanced beginner, you are practicing. Now, I'm making a break and say this is the story of Bob, but I can already tell you that only 1 out of 20 developers, and we've studied this across all regions, only 1 out of 20 developers are competent. Because to be competent, you need to have a 360 degrees comprehension of the domains required to deliver that product, that digital product, or your digital services. It includes a generic knowledge about security, privacy, data, ops, and all this kind of stuff. Very, very important. So he's in advanced beginner. Advanced beginner is a wide range. It's a spectrum of possibilities, but it's only the hard-working people move from advanced beginner to competent. And proficient are those who mentored others, train the others, speak. Those are signs that we recognize them. And experts are those who they are recognized as experts. They are working with intuition. They don't think on what they do. They just act. So it's becoming implicit knowledge. If we talk about development and architecture, Martin Fowler would be an expert, so that you can get a comparison. And the competent CTO, he's looking at this, and he's looking at all the aspects required for him to become a competent person. He's working with it with the coach and saying, I'm good in coaching and coding. I think I'm great in governance. That's one thing I'm very good at. I've done it a lot and things like this. I'm not that good in architecture, but I will improve and things like this. So he's having a perspective of domains where he might. It's self-assessment. It's nothing else. But he said, let me check a bit about governance and see, because I'm very good at it according to my self-assessment. Let me check what's that. And he's looking, studying and things like this, and he's finding a new definition of governance. The new definition of governance is efficiency management. So whatever we say we do, like we are taking these decisions to implement this or changes at the board level, how efficiently did we implement those decisions? That's a matter of governance. So, and he was confused. He thought that governance is strategy, and the things in the left are things he thought were governance, but they aren't. So having visibility over the capabilities of the company and the maturity of that is part of governance. The role is efficiency. Like there is a CTO role. How efficient is that in the organization? That's governance. So he's learning a lot, and unfortunately he says, oh, not even in this axis, I'm not a high achiever. So, and he, after learning more about governance and during the interviews for recruitment and recruiting the Scrum Master who should give a hand in efficiency management, because if there is something a Scrum Master does is efficiency management. So he's looking into it and says, stakeholder management, need to improve that. He's mentoring, teaching, he's removing impediments. Whoa, just a second. This seems like what I need to do, but at my level, like I have impediments with all these departments, I need to remove them. I'm a change agent, I need to do all that. It's like I'm in the same time as a Scrum Master, but as a very high level. How can I split that? And that's a very interesting topic, because he cannot be a Scrum Master of top level. He doesn't have the time to do that. He needs to also be strategic. So what parts of that are important and which aren't? So he's diving into this stuff like governance and the Scrum Mastering and efficiency management and processes. And he says, hey, there are these kind of teams. I'm having here a team, so that's a Scrum team I'm having, and they are in a domain, so multiple teams. And in fact, this is where the board is. So there's lots of work. There's lots of work here which nobody facilitates, removing impediments, things like that. And this is a problem for the company. So he's going to take a small part of it for the moment, and of course, looking on ways on how he can be helped there, because his initiatives don't work because of this friction there. So he's landing on the new definition of requirements for the CTO role. And he says, okay. Everyone agrees that I need to express technology, talk about it. The initial definition of the CTO from the 80s was to translate technology to business, business opportunities to technology. So that's a high responsibility. I need to keep that. So I'm not changing that. It doesn't mean I need to do the studies around it and all that. I need to partner with executive officers. Definitely that's not working well. I need to enable governance. That's not something that I'm doing. And in the next sessions, you will see how he does that, because it doesn't mean he's accountable for the governance. There's a very interesting aspect there. And he needs to facilitate lots of work with the executive management and the tech team so that things work properly. And he's doing this with artifacts like with the roadmap presentation, with the impediments and value streams mapping and all this kind of stuff. We'll discuss in another session. So he's facilitating some work and he's enhancing agility. He doesn't find any possible way where agility and real engineering management and engineering practices can work if other departments don't understand what they're doing, because that's so transformative. It touches everything. Agility, you alone doesn't work. You need the stakeholders, you need the clients, you need the users. So you need to, there's much more in doing that. And who's going to do that? The CTO will play an important role. So he needs to find a way of how much he's doing, but he's accountable for that. And things like identify new technologies, he suddenly says, this is important and depends on context, but I will not do that all the time. I have a great team doing this and so forth. And then he goes further and he says, but it's a bit too much. It's a bit too much. And he's looking for ways of delegating some of this stuff. And he finds this very popular framework coming from the US and the new role called VP of Engineering or Engineering Manager, where these people are not focused neither on strategy, order thinking, but they are taking care of all the operational stuff required by the IT teams, so recruitments, a bit of Scrum Masters, because efficiency in terms of engineering is going to handle all that. So focused on day to day. Everyone feels like that's too much for the CTO, so he's splitting this. Of course, we need to look at the way this is popular or not, because this is not the implicit way of CTO, delegating a part of responsibility. It's just becoming more and more popular, you might have heard about. And then he goes back to things like, nobody knows what the CTO really looks like, but especially in CTOs, we've talked at startups, we've talked about the startup CTO who gets stuck. This is a moment it says, fortunately, in this case here, I'm no longer there, but this seems to be the thing, the challenge for many CTOs, because they start as developers. This is Bob, the first version when he was a CTO. He's becoming a CTO as a developer that require new things, and getting stuck there and getting all the power from the technical expertise. It's very challenging, and the only area where things are still fuzzy is when you are in a startup, where everyone does everything. So whatever the framework is, some of the things that we say here don't apply, because when you don't have a business model and the financial safety, it's very hard to keep with the strategy. You don't have a business model. In fact, you don't have a strategy. After you have the most important aspects of your business model, you've discovered that, then you could say, I know a direction, I have a direction, and I'm working towards that direction. So I can work on a strategy and things like this. So this is very important. So for the startup CTOs, things are and should always be challenged, whatever Bob is saying here in this presentation. And he gets back to the idea of CTO and responsibilities, and he says, look, to be honest with his coach, I can't do this. I can't do this because there's too much on my plate. Nobody knows all that. Nobody knows security, data, privacy, being competent in all these aspects. So I've lost control. My company lost control, and most of us lost control. Strange enough, the entire economy the world economy is based on what we do as technology, and we don't have control, neither us as those who are doing it. So we need to redefine a bit the way we have control and share this. And he defines this vision like maybe there is it's not a maybe. He needs to try it. CTO as a team, because technology comes also from sales teams who want a CRM and lots of tooling around, and there are best practices in tooling and in this area, so they come with their technologies, at least in terms of expectations. Marketing, there's lots of tools in marketing, so he needs to include in whatever he's doing all that. And then lots of other aspects of it. I'm just giving some examples. So that, in a sense, the technology landscape and the technology decision making can't, even if it's today, fully the responsibility of the CTO. So he needs to share that. However, if you do that, and when Bob does this, things turn out well. And you will understand in the next session why this turned out well. There's a catch here in the CTO strategy. But most of the CTOs, to be honest, when they ask, I need to partner with a security officer, privacy officer, and things like this, it's not immediately embraced, because that's going to consume even more financial energy. And that's not an easy, not always easy, I'd say. But for Bob and the story and the series and the episode, that's being embraced. So Bob is going to be part of what we call a technology office team. He will still have his leadership and direct accountability with his team and things like this. But there will be there in that board like the security officer, privacy officer, and so forth. Now, wrapping all this together, Bob says, I've been through 4 years of consistent work. And I think the idea of 4 years is not anodyne here. And I've studied, I've worked with other CTOs, I've asked other CTOs. These aspects, these 5 responsibilities, these 5 requirements here, they always repeat. If one of them is missing, in terms of the accountability and the strong engagement and commitment for the CTO, it's a matter of time until things will break in various ways. The way it breaks, doesn't know. His friends have other challenges when they break this. And there are things which are contextual, that in a sense nurture everything else from the above. When he needs to be involved, but that's contextual. And the way a CTO involves more in these aspects depends on the state of the company, depends on the size of the teams, depends on the architecture context, business model, all sorts of things. But the only things which are always there are these 5. And then he looks, and not even things like chief architect. Because for those who don't know, for example, we are having sessions like CTO Talk where we stress this vision and we ask real CTOs how they implement this, and always the same questions. And the idea of the chief architect is not always present. So some say CTO is a chief architect, some say no. And it depends on and there are CTOs who are not technical, and if that's good or wrong, that's another discussion, but they exist and they work, and I've seen companies doing quite well with this as well. So that needs to be taken into account. And the ideal CTO, looking at the Dreyfus model, so in average, to move from the advanced beginner, which is a struggle, long journey and so forth, into competent, it takes in average 4 years. Because it's practice. You can't be competent without practice. So lots of things to train, practice, and things like this. Being the translator, co-partner with the executive officer, engage your team with the upper levels of the strategy. And yeah, while you are an advanced beginner, you might feel the need of creating stuff. Just try to reuse. It's much more safer and faster. Work your soft skills and enable governance and facilitate work. That seems to be most of the activities that we do to get better while we are advanced beginners. And then we switch to the competent level where we are getting more strategic in thinking, and we are better at all the axes in terms of 360 degrees IT knowledge. We might even involve a VP of engineering and all this kind of stuff. And that is also the area where your contributions are more interesting for other CTOs, and you can train other CTOs. More difficult to mentor them because that requires a bit of skills that you develop at the proficient level, but that's still doable. But when you try to mentor, you become visionary, and you develop your own way of structuring the role and practices. That's the sign you become proficient. And expert is like you are a philosopher, like you are working more with myetics, you are reinventing, developing new visions, and you are coaching the CTOs. So you are coaching CTOs who are better than you, much more better in what they do in their company. So you don't help with that content, we help them in other ways. And we've landed to the Q&A session. Yeah, this is the first episode. I hope
that was great, Cornel. Thank you so much. Some really interesting resources in there as well. So we've got a few questions already, but if anybody's got any additional questions, just pop them in the Ask a Question. We've got a little bit of time. So let's pull up the first one from Christoph. So thank you. So how to manage those frequent situations you are not given full CTO authority in terms of budgets, hiring strategy, etc. Founders are way less competent than you in terms of the business strategy, but they dismiss your advice and experience. The CEO is someone technical and wants to micromanage tech, something, excuse me, that even a tech lead should not do whilst not doing his job to build the business. So I think there's probably a few things in there. So what's your experience if the CTO isn't given the full authority?
Yeah, so there are at least 3 important questions from what I've heard. First is the budgeting stuff, then is the micromanagement of the executive officer and the way that works out, and then there are the founders and the financial community fueling the business. That's highly criticizable what I said. So in terms of budget, there is a new session where we will get back to it, which is called CTO strategy. And the question here is how much of the CTO is strategy? Because when you allocate budget, in a sense, you take resources from a critical area, you move it in another, and this is in a sense, part of the strategy decision making. So how much of the CTO is strategy? That's a key question. So we are going to answer that in a much more details, better details the next. But the conclusion is there can't be two strategies in the company. That's usually going to harm the company. So there needs to be one strategy. And the executive officer is accountable for that and engaging the executive management from which the CTO is also a part into refining these strategic decisions and properly allocate budget and things like this. The challenge here is that most of the executive officers are not trained in this, neither they are not necessarily aware that they feel they have a strategy, but they don't really know what a strategy means, so they need help. So a CTO needs help, but I don't see any reason why an executive officer wouldn't need help. Now, there's also some psychological aspects and studies, very interesting, that show that in executive ownership, there is an important, a more important presence of selfishness, of narcissism. Maybe that's also something that we should take into account. And why are these? I'm not saying this is happening because that's not the majority, but it's a more important aspect of it. So I'm saying this because I'm not going to answer anything that addresses these people. That's different. So assuming average, standard, normal functioning people are executive officer, when we micromanage, it's a vicious cycle. It's a great book called Agile Coaching, and in this book, Lisa, the author of it, explains micromanagement is a vicious cycle because you expect something, you get someone, and you say this is what it means to do a great job. This person will do its best, but not perfectly, and you say, missing this part. You go into more details, you add details to this person. This person will do, but not deliver the same thing. You go in more details, and in fact you never get trust. So the problem with micromanagement is that you don't get trust. So it's a trust problem. Now, because now we know what kind of problem it is, we can address it with the right tooling. There is tooling for how to trust people, how to better work with, and so things like this. So at least if I don't answer to you, you know that this is a trust problem and there is tooling there. Very, very interesting. We might even, Anna, do something, a session there, because that's how to go from micromanagement to trusted, and it's all about partnering with the executive officer.
Yeah.
Now, one last thing about it is the executive officer. And if CTOs don't really understand because they lost control on all these complexity layers, we are talking about VUCA world, lots of uncertainty, and we don't really know what's happening in tech. We need to admit that. For executive officers which are not technology natives, that's even fuzzier. So we need to redefine what control means. We need to explain what uncertainty means, why there is uncertainty, why this is normal business in technology, and how to manage complex systems. There is a great book I still recommend from Craig Lerman in Lean Large Scale Scrum Organizations. I think it has 20 years and it wraps everything together. And it's one point in time when it goes to the stochastic non-deterministic systems, because this is what we have. So vulgarizing what stochastic non-deterministic systems mean will help. Why we are there. And ODA loop is a great tool there. So what are the things that we need to observe so that we orient what we do, so that we decide and act? So those are the things I would follow implicitly without context and things like this to better engage, a bit educate, and build on trust. So yeah, and it's the last question of it is about the financial investors. There is a new body of knowledge emerging there that comes from VCs, from if you've looked at books like Design Sprint. Why would anyone invent a design sprint framework or methodology today? Because, and in fact, we were talking in agility and engineering practices to engage with customers. We weren't doing that well, and to engage with users, we weren't doing that well. But there are VCs, there are investors, and there's nothing that linked us with them. So there was the missing link. And then things like Lean Startup emerged, design sprint, lots of a new body of knowledge that help us and give us the tools to link what we do with the strategy and with the financial journey of the company. So if I'd have to choose one, that would be Lean Startup to look at. So I hope it's it answered.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so just sticking on this strategy bit there, and this is kind of so how can a CTO become more strategic when you're busy facilitating a lot of the work still?
Yeah, that's such a because first you need to be conscious about the fact that that's where you should be. So being aware that was the origin of the role, what kind of flavor you have as a CTO, because if you are more as an infrastructure manager or more like a visionary, how is that going to become more strategic? And there are actually two things here. Companies, when they look at their strategy, they are looking at their value chain. And you say, when you look at your value chain, can I reconfigure the value chain in ways that technology matters with technology? So I'm doing something, I'm replacing 2 steps in the value chain with my technology. And this is where your company fits. And that's your value proposition. It makes you unique. And that's critical. If that's the case, as a CTO, you need to be very strategic. But if that's not the case, and we say, hey, in fact, as a company, technology, what we do, we don't really innovate there, and we in the value chain or create a new value chain, we are in fact doing it faster or better with technology. And if are the answers, as a CTO, you need to be much more operational efficiency. The way you act is completely different. So you might not need to be very strategic because that's not the business you're in. So that's because if you that's not the business you're in and you want to be more strategic, you will harm the organization because there's a non-fit or something. So those are the two things. So for those who are in the innovating part and the reconfiguring the value chain with their technology, products, and services, executive officer is the strategy owner. So he's integrating whatever suggestions. What you can do is pitching your best use cases, business cases, look at the market, what in your proposition makes your company consolidate the value proposition or bring something in uniqueness, in the unique value proposition. And also a very important role, hard for executive officers, and this is where CTOs struggle, is in the product, because it's very hard to say no to customers. So in a sense, all this pressure turns back to you and you say, well, we cannot do everything. So what can you do there? So that's one, when you co-partner with the executive officer, you say, in fact, a great strategy doesn't mean you satisfy everyone, including us. We'd love to do everything. But it seems that greatest strategies don't satisfy everyone. That's the thing we need to agree upon. Because if we don't agree upon on this, everything will be much, much different. But we need to agree on this. And this executive officer needs to agree on this. You can give examples like IKEA. Go to IKEA and say, I want luxury furniture and things like this. And they say, yeah, that doesn't seem, you're not our customer. And it's easy for that. And they will not change tomorrow because they got a complaint. You are not satisfied there. They will not change that.
Yeah.
So this is important for you. Not satisfy everyone with the strategy and know if you are more strategic or operational efficiency. I hope it's
yeah, I think that's good. I think it's important to understand the strategy, and like you say, it's to kind of limit that strategy to what you want to really be good at, I guess, and then working to prioritize, align, to be very aligned to the strategy, to make sure that you're prioritizing, because like you say, you can't do everything.
And whatever you do, you are part of you are contributing to the strategy. Strategy is not yours. This might frustrate some of you, but technology strategy, if it's not business strategy or part of it, we are doing it wrong.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. So we've got a question here from Kalayan. Do you think that 4 years is enough to achieve mastery?
Yes. It's hard work. So it's very difficult to do it alone, but you can partner with friends. You can co-partner with people from. This is one of the reasons I found CTO Craft so interesting, because there's a community, and to find someone who struggles as you or better than you and do work with them is difficult. I think it's almost impossible to do it alone. So if you are doing it alone, you are not doing it right, and 4 years will be not enough.
Yeah.
So that's. But if you have enough touch points, data points, and mirrors, first thing you will say, wow, I have so much feedback, I can do all that. So you will need a decision framework, say what's most important for you, and you have a guideline, and the requirements here are a framework, part of that framework, and say this is the most important. You work consciously in it, you improve it, you will see results very fast. I have just had a session with a CTO I'm mentoring, and he yesterday told me that he, in 2 months, the executive management, the partners, it's a startup, and they said it's such a huge difference in what they are doing and how they co-partner together. And 4 years is more than enough, but it's not easy. Yeah. Every day counts.
Yeah, definitely. That's great advice as well, not doing it alone. I think the CTO Craft community is great in terms of partner up and lots of learnings from each other.
I'm not saying this because I'm new to CTO Craft, so I have no reason to do that, to say that alone. I just say, hey, there's an opportunity there. And one ingredient that might count. I had a CTO talk with the CTO from Atom Bank, and he said something in the end when I asked him, is there something that people should take, one thing? And he said, CTO as a privilege. Because if you are a victim as a CTO and you are just frustrated and things don't work and things like this, you need to get unstuck from that mindset and things like this. And it's easy to be there because we know things are like they are. You need to get unstuck from that and see the role as a privilege. Once you see this, the world is yours.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thanks. Right, I think we've got more time for one more question. So this is Nitish, who's just saying, sorry, I couldn't understand the line between the VP of Engineering and the CTO in terms of the roles and responsibilities. Does the VP of Engineering report to the CTO or CIO?
Yeah, but the VP of Engineering reports to the CTO. I see organizations where that's different. But anyway, I find it odd to do it different. I see organizations where the technology team doesn't report to the CTO as well, reports directly to the chief product or to the executive officer. We can debate on that. We could, and one way of looking at it is, and the problem, a challenge here is that nobody knows what the CTO role means. What are the responsibilities? And it's easy to say it's like this or like that. It's too opinionated, and I think that's a very interesting challenge all of us have. But once you express that, and things might get back into the given lines. Look at the CTO flavors, because if you are a CTO external facing kind of CTO, that's not really a problem if the technology team is not necessarily assigned to you, because you are customer facing, you are advising and things like this. But if VP of engineering reports to the CTO, and this scenario in Bob's story, the purpose of VP of engineering was to take a part of the load, which is important and very operational, from the CTO, because that's in many organizations a job in full time. I hope I've answered to.
Okay, yeah, that's great. Okay, well, quickly one more then, I think. So this is from Nadim. Is going back to an individual contribution role from a CTO role, do you think that's lowering the chance of working as a CTO in the future? Or potentially adding value to that?
Can you repeat the beginning?
Yeah, is going back to an individual contributor role lowering the chance of working as a CTO again in the future, in your view?
As an individual contributor, meaning like CTO.
So maybe going back to an architect type role or a lead developer type role.
It might sound strange, but it's not that uncommon. I have a CTO friend that just did that 1 week ago. So he's becoming back a chief architect and things like this, because there needs to be fit. There is someone that I appreciate a lot. It's an admiral from the French army called Louis, and he's saying something. People need to fit. It might be interesting, it might be great as a role and things like this, but if you don't fit, it's not going to work. So you might want to get back when you see everything you need to do. And it's not about just responsibility, it's also about the company, because you might not fit in that company. You might not fit it with that context, that team, that stage of development. Maybe later it was interesting for you. There are many reasons. I would not avoid any second to say, I go back as a senior developer or as a process manager or as a whatever I was, but it makes me feel better. That's not a problem. That's not a problem at all. And in fact, I think because you do that, it can be very interesting for the company. Because for once, there is someone doing operational job and things, but understands the board, understands how things work.
Yeah, great. Okay, so I think we've just about come to the end there, Cornel. So thank you so much for talking to us today. So this is part of four series. So the next one, I think, is the 1st of July. So we'll send details out for that. But I think from what you've said, that's maybe more around strategy side of things.
CTO strategy.
Yeah, okay, cool. I've added details from LinkedIn into the chat. So if people want to connect with Cornel, go ahead and do that. There's another CTO Bytes event next Friday, if you want to join, so look out for that. And that's looking at the state of front-end report. And that's it. Thank you very much, everybody. This is recorded and it will be sent out. So we will get a copy of everything. And thank you again, Cornel.
With pleasure. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.